All right. So here's our final lecture. This again is one of those optional readings for you. Well, optional readings for Jones and Bond's class. I still think you guys should be reading these chapters. The final thing that ties together Unit 4 is this discussion on continuity and change. So the reason why I love Period 2 is that it's so interesting because it's the first time humanity is interacting with each other comprehensively. That people in America are being impacted by the choices made in China, and people who are living in South America are being impacted by choices made in the Middle East. When we're talking about continuity and change over time, we're looking at things that stayed the same from 1450 to 1750, and things that changed from 1450 to 1750. What was the world like in 1450, and what was the world like in 1750? And see if like the endpoint means they're different, and the endpoint means they're similar. Kind of a hack on CCOT would be that broadly things are likely to stay the same. Well, more specifically, things are to change, right? That makes kind of sense, right? Like, this is not a good continuity, but largely humans had grain-based diets from the period 1450 to 1750. You can talk about rice in China and wheat in wheat and potato, wheat in America, and potatoes in wheat in Europe and potatoes in America. Now, more specifically, a change would be what carbohydrates are being consumed by people during this time. So as a result of Columbian exchange, it's not just Americans eating potatoes anymore. Potatoes are being eaten by people all over the world now because of the Columbian exchange. So you see how like broadly continuities are easy to determine, and then specifically changes are easy to determine. All right, so now we're going to go. This is only 3 slides, but knowing how I've been going these lecture days, it's probably going to be 20 minutes. But remember, watch me faster. Okay, so a big change would be technology during this time. That in 1450, people had one way to move around throughout bodies of water. By 1750, there are all these different ways to move around and how to move around. So technologies like astro charts, which astronomy charts, not like Pisces is rising, so now you know where to go. Astrolabes allow you to determine where the equator is, compasses that help you determine where north is, magnetic compasses that know where north is on their own, lateen sails, not siles, that allow you to move with less wind. Carracks, caravels, and flutes are all different kinds of vessels that allow transportation to be more effective. Another big change, what I just was talking about, was the change of diets of people that now, like people in America, didn't eat pigs. Now they eat pigs. People in Europe did not eat potatoes or corn. Now they eat corn. People in Southeast Asia did not eat chilies or jalapenos. Now they have jalapenos. Like all those things. Like, the Columbian exchange, I could probably talk to you guys for hours about the Columbian exchange because it's so fundamentally transformative to the human experience. We could not be who we are without the Columbian exchange. Another remarkable change would be what's called the Atlantic system. Up until 1450 or up until 1500, the world had been separated into Afro-Eurasia and the Americas. So there was this Atlantic Ocean between these two regions, and Pacific Ocean, obviously. And those geographical barriers prevented the Americas from largely interacting with Afro-Eurasia. But because of technological developments, now Africa, America, and Europe through the Atlantic Ocean were more connected with each other. And you have the movement of people from Africa to America, and the death of Americans as a result of Afro-Eurasian diseases, and the spread of European and Afro-Eurasian livestock like cattle and horses and sheep to the Americas to fundamentally change like the geography and flora and fauna of the Americas. So like they're septically connected, that the Atlantic system fundamentally changes the society, economics, politics, technology, environment, and culture of Africa, America, and Europe. To go more specific on economic changes, is a big result of these technological changes means the economy finally becomes globalized as opposed to regionalized. And we could say that it's not just like Afro-Eurasia and American economic systems. You also have the Europeans integrating into the Indian Ocean trade through rounding the Cape of Good Hope in Africa to work with Indian Ocean trade that they historically had not done. The Europeans largely have more influence in trade networks than they had historically. The colonies of the Americas lead to the change of these areas. The discovery of silver in Mexico and Peru changed the size at which economies can grow because now there's more precious metal to base people's currencies off of. Because the Americas have so much more land, they can produce so much more raw materials, which means economies can grow because there's more things to buy and to sell within the economy because of the production of the Americas. Mercantilism as an economic system that really focuses on trade is a new development. I'm tying my shoe. I'm sorry, guys. And until 1450, Europe had been much of an economic backwater. That it was the terminus of these trade routes in Unit 1, in Period 1. But the discovery of the Americas and the integration of Europeans into Indian Ocean trade meant that wealth accumulation in Europe increases dramatically, which leads to a redistribution of wealth throughout the world that's trending towards Europe. Now, it's important to note that for most of Period 2, the most wealthy nations on the planet are still not European. It's the Qing Dynasty and it's the Mughal Empire in South Asia. So it's trending towards European control, but Europe is still not as economically powerful as other states. Other effects of this new global economy would be that class stratification changes. Something I implied in our 4.7 lecture would be that this change in the relationship of Europeans have with trade lead to an increase in unlanded wealth, which means that people can get wealthy now without owning land, which historically had been the way that you get wealthy, because trade can get you money, but you don't need to own land to trade things. You just buy things from people who own land and then sell those things for more money and you make profit. And that means that owning land was no longer the most influential thing, which means that nobility, which were in Europe the historic land owners, no longer have as much political influence. Interestingly enough, the discovery of more gold and silver leads to the inflation of the value, the depreciation of the value of silver, because think of it like this. You find more silver, the supply of silver increases in the world. When there's more of something, the price of that thing goes down, which means that silver becomes less valuable as a result of the discovery of the Americas. And finally, what we're going to talk about is that the demand for labor intensifies. Because the world is more connected, that means there are more markets to sell to, which means there are more demands for goods to be purchased, which means you need more people working to produce the goods to be sold in those markets. Labor will always be, if you're going to become a business person someday, keep this in mind, labor will always be your highest cost. So if you can find cheap labor, use that cheap labor. Coerced labor is the cheapest labor because you don't need to pay for these people. You only need to pay to feed them and clothe them and house them to an extent, but you don't need to give them luxury or things like that. So slavery, indenture, and serfdom are all examples of coerced labor that persist and expand during this period because they are economically more viable than other systems. What's really important to note is, you might wonder, Mr. Jennings, well, why don't we have coerced labor? What we do, we still have coerced labor in parts of the world, but in general, we have less coerced labor. It's because it's less valuable now. Coerced labor is not good for unskilled, only for skilled labor. That you cannot force a engineer to engineer effectively, right? That's different. What makes unskilled labor useful in coercive labor context is that a person is replaceable. So that means that if someone refuses to cooperate in a coerced labor system, they can be kind of punished and tortured in a way that means that they don't have a lot of political power or will within that economic system. Now, in order to rationalize these coercive labor systems, racial hierarchies are established and changed. Obviously, the regions of the world had intolerance of people before before 1450 to 1750. Like, Christians in Spain hated Muslims in Spain. Chinese people thought everyone were barbarians around them and things like that. But to determine a social hierarchy based on people's skin color was a remarkably new development. And the only way it worked was through the violent imposition by states. So people refused to accept these racial hierarchies. They often were punished, put to death, destroyed for not accepting them. So this was mainly our focus on changes in the lecture, but you do have a pretty good, clear understanding of what those changes are. I hope you guys enjoy Unit 4. The next step we're looking at is going into Unit 5, which is Period 3. I will see you guys after the break.